All
All
right.
right, Rihanna, you ready to do this?
Yes.
All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Rihanna Milne. Rihanna, welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So Rihanna was selected as one of the top coaches to follow in 2022 by Wealth Insider magazine. She's also been seen in Forbes. She's a certified global life, love, trauma, recovery, and mindset coach, a certified clinical trauma and addiction professional, and #1 best-selling author. She also is the host of a podcast called Lessons in Life and Love. She's an educational speaker and a licensed mental health counselor for over 22 years. Rihanna was also selected in 2021 as one of the 100 most successful women around the world. Hello, from the Global Trade Chamber.
How did I get that?
Jeez. She was also...
That was a shock to me as well.
Oh my God. She's a 5-star rated books, the #1 bestseller, Love Beyond Your Dreams, Break Free of Toxic Relationships to Have the Love You Deserve. All right, look, I brought you on here because I have therapists on here, I have coaches on here. Obviously, the focus on trauma is the common denominator. So let's kind of start what got you into or pulled you into this working with trauma?
Yes. Well, I did originally, I always wanted to be a counselor. Since I was a teenager, I was bullied horribly in middle school. And I asked my mom if I could go see a counselor. And she said, no one in this family will ever go see a counselor. And in my teen defiance, I said that I will become one. So at that point, I was getting Vogue magazine and Psychology Today because I was doing modeling. And thank God I had that to raise my self-esteem. But I also experienced a trauma personally. My very dear best friend at 16 was killed by a drunk driver. And again, I was not allowed to go to counseling over that loss. And I turned to reading the spiritual masters, the Dalai Lama, Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Tony Robbins, and many, many others, Marianne Williamson. So I became very spiritual and introspective as a young teenage girl. And most teenagers don't read that or interested in that kind of topic. And then in my 20s, I lost another dear friend, roommate at Penn State. I was there for broadcast communications, and she was murdered by her boyfriend. So some of these traumas that I went through gave me great compassion for others. At age 26, I married early. I had 2 children. And by 26, I was divorced, went through a bankruptcy due to my husband's business decisions, and was back out there on my own. And luckily, I had a very strong mindset at that time from studying the masters, and opened up a model and talent school and agency. And that's when I really started doing the mindset for success work. What took me into the trauma piece was many years later when I wanted to go back to school to be a counselor. So I had my daughters and made sure I could raise them as a single mom. And once they were taken care of, I went back many years later at age 37 and graduated with 92 credits, which they sometimes call a triple master's, in applied clinical and counseling psychology. So I opened up my practice in New Jersey, Southern New Jersey. I'm from Philly. And it was called Therapy by the Sea, because I always find the ocean and water to be very therapeutic. And at that time, trying to still raise my children and support us, I went into other jobs as well. So I always had private practice, but I also got hired into the school system because I was the SAC counselor, student assistance counselor. So in our area, we handled the emotionally upset kids that mostly came from traumatic homes. And I worked at every grade level, kindergarten all the way through college. I ended up working at the Rowan College Student Center as well, handling crises, trauma-related incidences, bullying, the bullied, kids that don't have parents that didn't come home at night. I mean, you name it, it was there. So
excuse me, so Rihanna, so at this point, were you a counselor, or you were a counselor in training?
Up in New Jersey, they called it LPC. So I was a licensed professional counselor. In Florida, they call it LMHC.
Okay.
So I was LPC, and because of all my schooling, I also became LCADC, licensed certified drug and alcohol addictions counselor, And I also was teaching LCADC classes for Stockton University in New Jersey. So I was doing all these things. Then I moved on from the schools to work in a mental health unit for youth ages 5 through 19, again, a hospital center. And I also worked with women from the prison system and in a teen drug and alcohol center. But no matter what the various jobs were that I had,
Yeah.
it was all trauma related. And I
Mhm.
saw the same things over and over and over again. And it wasn't until my own marriage later in life, when he had a secret life and I went through some personal things. When he looked at me, he says, "What's the matter with me? Why do I sabotage everything I love?" And I said, "I honestly don't know, but I'm going to ask a lot of my therapist friends and the people that knew him and knew us. It's like, we can't figure it out."
Mhm.
So that's what started my research that led me to childhood trauma. And I became a specialist in that after my own situation.
Well, wow. Okay. You,
So
I mean, you sound like, and you are a pretty incredible person to endure that and to uh, continue on. I mean, I'm not, obviously this is not easy, but you sounds like you persisted and you continued on moving forward. Rihanna, when you were and started working in the school system and with kids and started seeing what was trauma, how did you respond to that? How did you react to that? Did you know what
I
it
loved
was?
working with kids. Well, I did various things. One of the things that I did that schools really weren't doing or didn't hear of at the time in early 2000 was meditation. My office was called Miss Rihanna's Relaxation Room. So if they were upset, they went down to see Miss Rihanna and we would sit and meditate so I could calm down their nervous systems. I also used music therapy. One of my favorites and their favorites was listening to Louis Miguel, Spanish singer. I don't know the language, but the melody was so soothing for the
Louis Miguel.
kids.
I don't know that person.
Oh, he's won many Grammys award for the top Spanish singer. He's really lovely. I think I have every one of his CDs, but I loved it. And the kids would just calm right down. The teachers there, "What are you giving those kids back there? They come back all mellowed out and calm."
So was this
So
all intuitive on your part?
yeah, I use what I thought would capture them.
Right.
Being in talent, I also created a talent show. So there were certain rules around that. And if they wanted to be part of the talent show, they couldn't get detentions or suspensions. And that was cool because at the time my daughter was singing with a top artist, actually a hip hop artist, and was on 3 multi-platinum CDs. So I brought in my talent experience into the schools and raised their self-esteem. I had them on TV. I had them in newspapers.
Mm.
So they were like little stars of the schools. This was elementary, K-6 school.
Mm.
And then I did a program called Stand Up for Friendship, which was to take all the bullying out of the school. When I went, it was pretty much a war zone.
Wow.
And they had a bully busting buddy. And if someone was in trouble, they would come to me and they learned to negotiate through their differences. And then I did positive behavior charts. I had charts all the way around my office. If they had a good week, they could go into my treasure chest and get a few surprises. Of course, at first, that's an extrinsic reward. But they found when they were behaving and doing well, their teachers were kinder to them, the kids liked them more, and they liked themselves more. So we kind of talked about, what they were experiencing at home.
Mm-hmm.
I was also the DIFUS counselor. If any of the children were abused, it was on me to make that phone call, which is not always easy for the counselor in the school. But we also talked through, we're going to get your parents some help. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of different strategies that I used to invoke trust, fun, that they would open up and, learn to want to be better because they weren't learning a lot of these skills at home.
What was it like for you personally to be working in and amongst this type of trauma? Given your background,
I
given the
loved
fact that
making a
that
difference.
you were bullied, I mean,
Yeah.
that's clear. But was it challenging for you? Were you finding yourself triggered in any at any time?
No, I've learned that you don't take that personally. I mean, I
Right.
work with adults, men and women, and the LGBTQ population today with trauma. And we have to get them beyond their anger, their fear-based negative thinking, their anxiety, their depression. And it's all holistic that I use. I use vitamin therapies, meditation, definitely cognitive skills to overwrite these messages that keep coming up for them over and over again. I help raise their self-esteem, give them the skills to get back out there. Most of the people I work with have love trauma, so coming from abusive relationships. Learning to trust again and look at dating differently. Like if they're ghosted, it's not like, oh, they don't like me, I'm not attractive enough.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's like, well, that's somebody that didn't behave very well. Next, you know, it's a different way of approaching life and love, and that's what I teach today. Working with the students, I just loved it. You know, it's always I put into their mind, what can we do? You know, not dwelling on the problems all the time. I'm very solution focused. What can we do? Let's brainstorm. Let's start the action to solve the issues.
You know what I'm reminded of is Bruce Perry, who just wrote a book with Oprah, is very well-known trauma. He's a physician, but he's very well-known in the trauma field. And one of his, if not his first book, was called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And in that book, which is a series of kind of chapters or episodes of his experience starting out as a young psychiatrist, he highlights one of the women is this woman who takes care of these kids, and she's amazing. And you sound like her. You remind me of her, because he's coming from this Western medical perspective, and she's the opposite. She's just showering these kids with love and presence. And you remind me of that very much.
That's nice.
It's
nice.
really cool. And I really admire and respect that, because it just feels so natural for you.
I guess I have the empathy of remembering what I went through the pain of feeling different, not good enough, not measuring up. When this situation happened, actually I had two love traumas. The first husband stole $200,000 from my mother. So it took me 16 years to pay that back, because it was the right thing to do. And that's why I was working 4 or 5 jobs at one time and still raising my girls, who are very successful today, thank goodness. But yeah, I always could relate to that pain of wanting to talk to someone and not being allowed, or not allowing to have a voice, or that your feelings don't matter. You know, just pretend everything's okay, or don't tell on your mom or dad, you know, those kinds of things. So I do get a lot of compassion working with kids. When I was working at the high school level, I was at Hackensack High School in North Jersey, which had a pretty tough crew. I worked with the Crips and the Bloods and, some of the gang members. But again, I was cool because my daughter sang with a hip hop artist. So I got them. I got fashion. I understood them. And I had one girl, this is like one of my stories, so to speak, that I'll never forget how I had to handle this. She went home on a Friday and her whole family moved out on her. She came in Monday, Miss Rihanna. My parents, well, her mother was in Jamaica and didn't speak English. So uneducated, didn't have the money to come to the States. And here she is left alone. The father met a younger woman. He left with her, just a little bit of food in the refrigerator and her bedroom and clothes. And that was it that she went home to. So right away, I had to step in our area. It's called DYFS, Division of Youth and Family Services. I had to call them, try to find her a shelter. And the strangest things would happen. The shelter would say, well, she needs a parent to sign her in. I said, obviously she doesn't have a parent to sign her in, and I am not a legal guardian, but this girl needs a roof over her head right now. So I had to go to the higher ups in DYFS and get an attorney to work on her behalf so we could get her shelter. So you never know what's going to come in your office when you're there in a school setting. Another one of my stories, when I was working at a rehab center, since I was LCADC. I was training at the time, so we're called techs back then. You have to get a whole lot of credits. And so I was there, just to chat with the kids and kind of babysit them really and do some light things. And all they were doing is they'd have like one group lesson, maybe once every 4 days they get to talk to their counselors. And I'm like, this is not right. This is really, they're getting ripped off. So I went to the director and I said, look, I'd like to teach them life skills, how to get jobs, how to do a resume, social skills, proper communication, teaching them to dress on a budget, life skills that they need when they get out of here. And they're like, well, we're not going to pay you any extra. And I said, I really don't care, but I can't sit around and see these kids just watch TV and smoke cigarettes. Mm-hmm. I can't, jive with this whole thing going on right now. So I'm very much an advocate to help kids, teens succeed. And I really think children are brilliant. And I think they feel that from me. When my daughter at 5 years old said, Mom, I want to help the kids in Africa. She was watching the Save the Children commercial. And I said, hon, you have a heart of gold. You're really smart. You'll figure that out, how you'll do that one day. And her touring took her across the world. She ends up in Africa, started putting on water wells in Tanzania, Africa at the age of 20, and now has 21 water wells with her charity. So when the mindset for success, which is my book, Live Beyond Your Dreams, this is imperative to everyone's healing, growth, change, transformation. And I use that with all my clients still today. I've been doing that now for over 40 years. So even with my models and actors who came and their families are like, why are you doing that? You're not pretty enough. Or I had one girl, her parents said, look in the mirror, you're too fat. You're not going to be a model. You're throwing the money away. And she was like 22 and working for herself. She goes, it's my money and I'm going to believe in this dream. And she was a size 23. And I said, Jen, with my help, can you work with me to get you down to a size 16, 18? She goes, yes. I said, then we're going to promote you as a special size model. And she ended up making a ton of money with Ford special sizes. Wow. So the mindset is everything. And that's a big part of what I do.
So we talked about your work with kids, but you also obviously work with adults. You mentioned women who've been in unhealthy, toxic relationships.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Let me just ask a very simplistic question. Why do people get in? How do people get into them? How do they stay in relationships like that? Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. Well, this goes back to what I developed in 2012 called the Childhood Trauma Checklist. And I developed it once my ex-husband had asked me, what's the matter with me? And I started my research. And through the research, I put this list together thinking of all the clients I worked with, what I've personally gone through, what he went through. And this list is so exact that when I use it with my clients, it's so easy for them to self-do this and say, wow, when I go through this with them in the first session with me, they're like, I'm hearing things that I have never heard in therapy. And I've been in therapy 8 years. So in 1 hour, they learn more than they have in 7 years of therapy. Now, those are quotes from my clients. So, it's spelling it out very clearly to them why they are doing what they do. So if they're choosing toxic partners, why are they doing that? It's from the family dynamics. That's where it's from.
So this checklist is can people access this on your website?
Yes, my website's riannamilne.com, or I could tell you the top 10. And, it's funny, I did that before I saw the ACE test, which was many years later, but I was very excited that Kaiser Permanente did a group of 17,000 plus people, but it was mostly around diet and health, right? Because they were overweight people and they went into the childhood trauma and developed the ACE test. But I'm like, how could they miss abandonment? How could they miss kids that were bullied? How could they miss kids from the foster care system that I took care of in the mental health ward? So to me, there was a ton of misses on the ACE test. And I continued to use my own top 10 trauma list. There are more, but these are the top 10. They also miss community trauma. And we're all experiencing that now with the COVID pandemic. Think of what all the little children are going through, plus the adults. Or Mother Nature events where whole communities are flood, fire, hurricanes, they're all displaced from their homes. So to me, there was a lot of misses on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was developed from what I was realistically working with, for 12 years at that time, all these different people from trauma. And like I said, even women from the prison system. So that's where my list has come from. It's the one I prefer today.
That sounds really interesting. So we'll have your website linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Your website is Rihanna Milne, RianaMilne.com.
Yes.
So for people who do, and again, we're talking about men and women who get involved with toxic relationships, not just women, you're saying this just doesn't come out of the blue. There's a reason for it. Once people come to you, let's say they want help, you identify or begin to identify the reasons. What happens then?
The first session with me is an introductory session. I do 5 simple assessments, simple for them. And then I sit and I put the puzzle pieces together based on simple questions to them and what they have shared in writing to me. So at that part, they're starting to understand where their patterns are. And yes, I work with singles and couples, like I said, straight and LGBTQ clients, as well as seniors. And my oldest gentleman was 73 that came in. But that's the first step. And then from there, if they want to do coaching with me, I do work with people around the globe. There's many different programs for them to choose from based on what their life goals are and their desires and what they're coming to me with. So if there's someone perhaps in a 20-year toxic relationship and she stayed usually due to abandonment issues and lack of self-esteem, and she was not allowed to have her voice when she was a child. She might have been punished if she spoke up. She was probably with a tyrant man that if she spoke up, she might have been hit or punished or threatened. So over time, especially as a child, they find different type of coping mechanisms. One that's a big one for women is people pleasing. Well, if I'm really a good girl to my alcoholic mom, maybe she won't yell at me today.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, she'll be in a good mood when I get home. So that perfectionism, people pleasing pattern tends to go throughout life. And then they come to me many years later, just feeling burnout, just not themselves. They just lost who they were. They're looking for empowerment, confidence, happiness, joy, even confidence in career. That plays a big part as well. So I do a lot of career coaching as well with this.
So for the people listening to this, who would reach out to you? Who should reach out to you? Who are your people you want to work with?
Anyone that has experienced childhood trauma and is recognizing that they have the top 10 traumas and the severity levels are high. I do rate severity levels from 1 being very light to high. So they're recognizing themselves in the top 10 list, which is under the tests and quizzes section. And they know that they have repetitive, we call it relationship repetition syndrome. They keep choosing a toxic partner over and over again and can't figure out why. Mm-hmm. They've been in therapy and they're still choosing. Nothing has changed. And they feel stuck and frustrated. And like I said, there's bouts of depression and usually always high anxiety. Childhood trauma has no prejudice. That's why I work with any age, male, female. And I do a lot of different techniques. I'm also a CCTP, Certified Clinical Trauma Professional. So I use a lot of techniques from that training as well.
What helped you in dealing with all of your experiences, all of your trauma? What really kind of helped you?
Well, there's a new way to rewrite the story. A good example is, I never heard the words, I love you. And many people in my cohort said the same thing. Now, my parents didn't say that either, and I asked my mom, why don't you tell us 5 kids that you love us? She goes, well, those aren't words I've heard. And the research shows childhood trauma goes at least through 3 generations, if not more. And it was my needing to have empathy for how she grew up and understanding some of her trauma that allowed me to be soft and empathetic with her, to teach her, like, Mom, these are important words for your kids to hear. And now that I have the first grandchildren, I hope that you want to tell them that you love them too. So these kind of teachers, and it's interesting because all my clients have to go back to their parents and teach them a different way. Teach them a different way of communicating, or that they would rather have a more loving, open adult relationship now, instead of the parent being a tyrant on them still, trying to break those childhood binds that didn't work for them.
Right. And going back, that in itself is healing.
Yes. Well, we have to identify, where did the original dysfunctional patterns come from? From which traumas? How did they play out? What happened? For example, I talked with someone recently whose father died when she was 5, and father died when she was 8, had to go live with his sister who just got married, was pregnant. She was only 21, was not wanted there, had to live in the husband's parents. She just became like, doing all the chores. She became like the maid. So you can see all these traumas building up, that she never had the normal childhood. She had a lot of abandonment issues. And when she got married, she stayed with a very toxic man for a very long time. She goes, it was bad from the beginning. Why would I stay? Like you asked, why? And I said, because your craving for love when you were a little girl that you were not able to get is so strong, and it's part of your subconscious mind. And your conscious mind, even though it said, you've got to get out of here, this is not safe or healthy, the unconscious was stronger and craved the love, even though it wasn't healthy. Some man was there to love you. And she goes, God, that makes total sense. So we break each part of it down as far as what she was going through, and take it back to the original traumas and explain it to her that way. And then now, because I always say, you can't change what you don't know or understand. That's one of my quotes. If you don't know what's happening, how can you change it? If you don't understand why you keep choosing toxic partners, how are you going to change that either? Right? So it is really the understanding of the knowing the root of the issues, where they came from, using, like I said, the simple assessments that I use, and letting them first identify it and say, oh yeah, okay, now I kind of understand why I was doing what I was doing. Then we change it. We make the unconscious conscious awareness.
You have this really awesome combination of empathy, but you can tell that you don't take crap from people, like you'll call people on their BS, which I think is a great thing. That combination, you exude that, and I think that's awesome. Look, Rihanna, super inspiring. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Usually the best place is my website, riannamilne.com. On there, under quizzes, there's the 4 free tests for singles and couples. My free ebook, How to Have the Love You Deserve, is on there. Free book chapters of Live and Love Beyond Your Dreams are there. And you can access my podcast from there, which is Lessons in Life and Love, or .com, lessonsinlifeandlove.com. And my YouTube channel has about 250 educational audios and videos now at this time. So there's much you can use for learning. And of course, if this concerns you at all, just reach out to me and I'll be glad to direct you from there.
Okay. We'll have each of those linked up at the show notes page here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. As we close out, how about a go-to book recommendation, whether it's, toxic relationship related or not, something that inspires you?
Well, as I was doing the research, one of my favorite books that really made me say, aha, this is the beginning of what I need to dig deep into, was the ACOA Source Book by Janet Wositz. And my ex was definitely a child of an alcoholic. So that's just one trauma. But then he was poor. They were always struggling, and he was screamed at, and he was emotionally abused, and his mom was docile. And then I'm thinking of my clients So that was a really great book for me to get my research started. And I was so excited about learning this. And when my love book is 400 pages, I think I have 350 sources cut into it. And when I sent it to him, he goes, "Oh my God, I finally get what's been wrong with me." And he was in his late 50s. So it was an aha moment for me, for everything that I was going through, for him. And I said, I have to go to the world with this message. And that's when I started, becoming a coach. I got certified as a life, love, and relationship coach. And then I started writing the workbooks that my clients do with me. They're 150 pages based on the research.
Awesome. Say the title of that book again. The
ACOA source book, which stands for Adult Child of an Alcoholic.
Got it. Okay.
Source book. But they usually just kind of zero in on the child with the alcoholic parents.
Right.
And that's just one of 10 traumas, having a parent with addictions.
Right.
Yeah.
Rihanna, thank you so much for being here. Super inspiring.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.